With quorum, I'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask our clerk, Georgia Langer, to please call the roll for attendance.
Yes, Counselor Nolan,
Hello. Here.
Counselor Gonzalez,
Good morning here.
Counselor Rosenthal,
Present.
Counselor Lewis,
Present.
Counselor Simpson,
Present.
and Council President Peterson is excused today, and Deputy Council President Wong.
Present. All right, before we begin our agenda items, please note that in consideration of the importance of today's resolution and those who came to present, we will now hear a resolution before moving on to the presentation. Actually, I do have a couple things before that. Do we have to play a safety video for our in-person attendees?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Justin Dunlap, and I'm the department head stagehand electrician at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. Safety's a big part of my job. From electrical, making sure that I stay up to date on the NFPA codes and regulations, to rigging, where we make sure that everything is safely suspended overhead, to egress, ensuring that our audiences, performers, and technicians have the safest possible route in case of emergency. I'm out here at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, and you're in the Metro Regional Center. Please note that we're on the 3rd floor of the building. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the steps to the 2nd floor and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk. We will meet in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue.
Before we begin today's meeting, I just want to acknowledge that it's been a difficult week for many in our community, in our country. Regardless of how individuals may have voted, I'm going to first recognize that many in our region are now nervous about the potential for rising political violence, the potential for families being split apart, changes to our social safety net with regards to housing and healthcare, and potential for tariffs on imported goods that may hit Oregon companies particularly hard. Many within Metro also have questions about how the national election impacts their work. Will our transportation projects be funded? Will our climate projects continue how we envisioned? The short answer today is we aren't sure. There are, however, a few things I'm sure about. First is that this agency is still committed to the same things. We still care about racial equity. We want to protect our climate and make sure the residents of our region have access to the housing and services that they need. Metro will also be a safe place for everyone, regardless of your immigration status, your gender identity, or where you or your family is from. Second, no matter how this election turned out, my takeaway is that this is a moment for boldness and big ideas. That's what everyone in our country and our region was looking for. Bold ideas that improve lives. And absent that, we saw many people stay home this election. There's a lot of agency and influence we have here at Metro, and our work will continue. And finally, when times are tough, we need to take care of one another, practice self-care, community support, and mutual aid. Colleagues, today will be an emotional roller coaster of a meeting. We'll be considering a resolution proclaiming every November as Native American Heritage Month as we wrestle with that legacy of colonization. We'll pay respects to Bob Solinger, who was a giant in the field of conservation. And I just want to say, if anyone needs a moment throughout this meeting, anyone in the audience, please take that minute for yourself. We're going to move on to public communication. I will now open public communications on non-agenda items. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting?
Yes, if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I will manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can sign up to testify by raising your hand on Zoom. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand function has its own tab or is located within the reactions tab. Those calling in can raise their hands by dialing *9. If you are joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I will promote you to a full panelist when it is your turn to testify. I will call on your name or phone number when it is your turn to testify, and a window will appear asking you to accept being promoted to a panelist. Once you click accept, your Zoom window will close for just a brief moment before you rejoin as a panelist, where you will be able to turn on your camera if you like. As a reminder, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please introduce yourself for the record before testifying. In Deputy Council President Wong, I do not see any hands raised. We can give it a couple more seconds. I also do not see, I have not received any blue slips.
Okay. Councilors, I do want to acknowledge that we all received written testimony from a member of the public concerned with the Supportive Housing Services Program and how funds are flowing from our supportive housing measure. That person is not able to attend our meeting today, but I wanted to acknowledge on the record that we all had the opportunity to read the testimony in full, and that written testimony and other attachments will be made available in the recorded documents for today's meeting. And with that, I'll close testimony on non-agenda items. All right, so we're going to move on to our first resolution, resolution number 24-5441, for the purpose of proclaiming every November as Native American Heritage Month in the greater Portland area. Today, we have the opportunity to recognize the significant contributions and histories of tribes and Native people throughout our vibrant region. The greater Portland area is built upon the ancestral homelands, villages, and traditional use areas of the tribes, bands, and indigenous people of this region who have been the caretakers of these lands we cherish since time immemorial. To memorialize Metro's commitment to honoring and celebrating the rich and diverse tribal cultures, traditions, and histories of tribes and Native people in our region, today's resolution provides for observing November as Native American Heritage Month this year and in perpetuity. To elaborate on the importance and cultural significance of this proclamation, please welcome our tribal liaison, Katie McDonald.
Thank you, Councillor Wong, and good morning, councillors. Kisuk Wishnam Kapaniskit, Hukakli Katie McDonald, Chinesif Gaikin Salish, U Kalispe, U Tanaha Skilihu, Husukis Kukani, Hu Upnis, Husukis Kukani, Kusav Saka, Navsan Vietki, Chineslam Diathawaskit. So just saying good morning to you all, sharing my tribal affiliation. My name is Katie McDonald. As Councillor Wong shared, I am the tribal liaison in Metro's Government Affairs and Policy Development Office and help lead the work of Metro's Tribal Affairs program. Thank you for having us in the council meeting this morning to celebrate Native American Heritage Month 2024. We're before you today with a short staff presentation from our Tribal Affairs Program and our Indigenous Staff Affinity Group, and with Resolution 24-5441, proclaiming this in every future November as Native American Heritage Month. I am joined by my colleague and member of our Indigenous Staff Affinity Group, Jessica Rojas, who's the Stewardship Program Lead on the Community Education Services Team in Parks and Nature. We want to thank members of Council, leadership and staff, and also importantly our tribal and community partners who took the time to join us last Tuesday for our Native American Heritage Month coffee hour. We appreciate when our partners take time, when they feel comfortable, and when they feel welcome to come to our buildings, our engagement opportunities, and our events. We want to thank the Future Generations Collaborative, the Northwest Native Chamber, the SLEDS Portland office, Tana Culbertson, who's the Portland Parks and Recreation's Indigenous Community Coordinator, the Portland All Nations Canoe family, and also J.R. Lilly, the Tribal Liaison of the county, who is here again this morning, and many others for coming to join us for that coffee hour last Tuesday. Our Indigenous staff and our partners also feel seen and supported when Metro staff, Metro leadership, and especially our Metro Council take time to participate in these events. So thank you to each of you who took time to join us for the coffee hour last Tuesday. And none of this would be possible without the Metro facilities team, who have helped us hang blankets throughout the building this month, helped us share resources in a display that we have in the Metro Regional Center lobby, and who have helped us open our building to staff and members of the community to enjoy during that coffee hour. For folks in the council meeting in person and online today, we encourage you to take time to see the blankets that have been shared by members of our Indigenous Staff Affinity Group and to learn more about the cultures and the stories and the partnerships and organizations that each of those blankets uniquely feature. And if we could ask Georgia for your help, you can just kind of click through these couple slides while we're speaking. These are some photos of our Native American Heritage Month coffee hour last week, and we want to especially thank Anderson on the Oregon Convention Center team who showed up and took these beautiful pictures so that we can share them all with you this morning and share them with our partners. Before getting to the proclamation, we're hoping to continue the series of conversations that we've been having with you all throughout this fall, where we've been discussing several important days of remembrances and several important observances that included Indigenous Peoples Day just a couple weeks ago. Our presentations earlier this year have delved into important topics, including the legacy impacts of U.S. Indian boarding schools on tribes and tribal communities across the United States. And we have shared examples of our work that happened through the Indigenous Community Liaison Program in Parks and Nature and the Tribal Affairs Program in our Government Affairs Office, so that you all can learn more about what these programs do on behalf of our agency. We've also talked about the importance of recognizing and uplifting the interests of sovereign tribes, Indigenous community members, and Native serving organizations in our work. Today, Metro's Tribal Affairs Program works with 7 different tribes who are sovereign nations, and what we now know today is the states of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. We also partner with 25 plus serving Native community organizations across the metro area in our work to be responsive to the priorities and interests of the very strong and very diverse urban Native community in Portland that represents over 380 distinct tribal nations across the U.S. We actively participate in the Portland Indian Leaders Roundtable that's led by the Native Youth and Family Center, and we've increased coordination of the work that we do with local and statewide tribal liaisons. I really love this picture, by the way. We want to give a special shout out this morning to the current and former staff who have supported the county's Tribal Relations Program, Anna Allen and J.R. Lilly, who have supported the City of Portland's Tribal Relations Program, starting with Laura John, Stone Hudson, Miranda Mission, and also Adam Vicente, and to the new Tribal Affairs Director in Governor Tina Kotek's office, Shana Radford. All of these folks have been active partners in our work in Metro and across the region to help our respective governments better consult with tribes and be responsive to the interests and priorities of Native community. We've asked for your support, and we've shared specific actions that Metro Council and Metro as an agency can take to support tribal interests and Native community priorities, and to help talk about the importance of our work with tribes and Native community, to underscore the importance of our celebration of Native American Heritage Month, and to continue to elevate the needs and interests of our Indigenous and Native identifying staff. We have some direct quotes from members of our Indigenous Staff Affinity Group that I want to share with you this morning. So I'll share a couple of those comments and then we'll continue the presentation. So supporting Native and Indigenous communities can look like dedicating time, resources, and or pushing legislation that supports those communities. We've seen this support from our current council with members sharing space at events like our coffee hours for both Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Day of Awareness and Native American Heritage Month. Metro shared resources like space and funding for events like the Unity Conference, Indigenous Peoples Day celebration at Barbie's Village, and much more. Council and their team have also worked on legislation to continue to support Indigenous and Native community priorities. The support we've gotten and continue to get helps us create meaningful experiences with our communities. As a reconnecting Indigenous individual, I personally went to Salmon Homecoming for the first time, and the experience was restorative and lovely. Within our current display at MRC, I am sharing one of my blankets, and although it's missed in our home, it's lovely to share this part of my culture with the staff here at Metro. I look forward to future conversations to share and honor our stories, histories, and future together. From another staff member, I want to thank Metro and Metro counselors for being consistent in their support of Indigenous staff and community. Having spent more time this year with Indigenous staff at Metro has been affirming and always brings a smile to my face. I hope that Metro Council will continue to support work with tribes and Native community. From another member of our group, Indigenous community members co-host Metro's largest event, Salmon Homecoming, that brings together several thousand, majority BIPOC community members to honor salmon with 2 days of fun, food, and cultural connections along the Sandy River. The Parks and Nature Indigenous Community Liaison Program looks forward to continuing to grow this event and collaborate with Council and other departments to support and uplift this vital celebration. So thank you, Council, for the opportunity to briefly share a couple of those comments from our Indigenous staff and programs with you. So, just like Indigenous Peoples Day is every day, Native American Heritage Month is every month. All the land that we know as Portland, Oregon, and the United States and the Americas was, is, and will continue to be Indigenous land. And the bands, tribes, and Indigenous communities who have been with all of these lands since the beginning of time will continue to be here. They were here before, they're here today, and their nations will continue to exist in the future. Our celebration and acknowledgement of Native American Heritage Month today feels even more important to us with the political events and outcomes that have transpired this week and throughout this election season. It's also important with the milestones and watershed accomplishments that have supported tribal sovereignty over the past 4 years at the federal level, and the very real uncertainty we are now sitting with regarding the incoming administration's potential support and respect for tribal sovereignty and Indigenous communities. The current and outgoing administration has hired and supported the first ever Native female Secretary of the Interior of the United States, who has made unprecedented strides with her Native Assistant Secretary in supporting tribal sovereignty, the rights and interests of tribes, and tribal leadership during their tenure. The current administration also saw the first ever Indigenous leader of the National Park Service, someone from Oregon, from one of the tribes that we actively work with, who celebrated just earlier this week the formal adoption of the first ever tribal consultation policy for the Park Service to rely on in their work. On October 25th, for the first time ever, a sitting president also issued an apology for the historic and ongoing impacts and legacy of U.S.-sanctioned and funded Indian boarding schools across the United States, a topic that we've discussed with you several times previously. And earlier this summer, the current administration released a first-of-its-kind report highlighting the historic, ongoing, and cumulative negative impacts of the federal Columbia River dams on tribal communities. That report provides recommendations for how the federal government can further its treaty and trust responsibilities to tribes by acknowledging and integrating these impacts in its future actions. The report followed a first-of-its-kind action that also happened last December. We're about to be at a one-year anniversary on December 14th, when the U.S. government, the states of Oregon and Washington, as well as 4 tribes, including the Yakama Nation, the Umatilla tribes, the Warm Springs tribes, and the Nez Perce tribe, signed an agreement to establish and implement the Columbia Basin Restoration Initiative, a jointly developed, science-based, comprehensive, and durable strategy to restore salmon and other native fish populations to healthy and abundant levels ensure clean energy future, and support local and regional economic and climate resilience. This strategy would also honor longstanding and unmet commitments to tribal nations in the Columbia River Basin. Among the tribes, others in our region have also been leading the way. And earlier this year, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde called again on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to study non-hydropower alternatives for the Willamette River Basin to save imperiled Chinook and steelhead populations. And just last week, the Cowlitz Indian Tribe celebrated the removal of a dam on the Washougal River that will immediately support restoration of that natural ecosystem and salmon and steelhead within that watershed. Further west along the Oregon coast, leaders of two federally recognized tribes, including the Siletz and the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, called on the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, to take all appropriate actions to direct federal agencies to return sea otters, known to some tribal communities as alaka, to the Oregon coast within the next 5 years. Tribes have long recognized the critical importance of developing cohesive, unifying strategies that address tribal issues and bring them to the forefront at the local, the state, and the federal levels, and also across Indian country. We see that the current administration has supported tribes in these efforts. Unfortunately, most people today still don't know what a tribe is. They don't know how tribal jurisdiction works on reservations, and they don't know how treaties fit into the U.S. Constitution. An entire area of American law that goes all the way back to the founding of our country codifies and protects the sovereignty of tribal nations in what we now know as the United States. But this law is meaningless if the people who are in charge of managing, administering, and interpreting it alongside sovereign tribal nations and the citizenry who put those decision makers in power do not understand it. Based on the incredibly harmful and racist rhetoric and actions that have been displayed by leaders of the incoming administration, we are concerned that this lack of understanding will prevail and most likely mean that supporting tribal sovereignty and Indigenous community needs will not be a prominent feature of the next administration. This uncertainty and potential means and makes what we are doing here as a regionally elected government and what we now know as the Greater Portland area with tribes and Native community all that much more important. Our recognition and acknowledgement of Native American Heritage Month is an opportunity, sorry I'm getting lost in my notes, to hear your continued affirmation and commitment to the goals and relationship development efforts that we have with interested tribes in our work. It's a continued affirmation and commitment to grow and deepen our partnerships and engagement with Native community serving organizations across the greater metro area and with urban Indigenous members of our community. And it's also an affirmation to our Indigenous identifying staff that who they are and the cultural and lived experiences and intersectional identities that they bring to work every day on behalf of our agency, and that the work that they do is important to you all and to our agency. Later today in a separate presentation, you're going to hear about the comprehensive and years-long efforts that members of the Willamette Cove team have taken to consult with 6 tribes and deeply engage members of Portland's Indigenous community in the future remediation, healing, and restoration of Willamette Cove, the site that we take care of today. The work that's happened in that project thus far also exemplifies these commitments and affirmations that you and our agency have taken to tribes and to Native community. And to wrap this up relatively soon and get to the proclamation, I'm going to invite our teammate Jess Rojas to now read our proclamation, and then we'll hand things back over to you for your discussion and consideration for adoption.
Thank you, Council, for this opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Jessica Rojas. I identify as a mixed-race Chicana, and it's an honor to share this proclamation today, to be asked to read it into the public record as a guest resident of these lands. I'm joined by my colleague here, Vanessa Pacheco, who's also part of the community education and stewardship team. We're taking a short break from delivering plants, but just want you to know that you're with us in the field as well. So I'll go ahead and start reading the proclamation within the whereas. Whereas the area known as Greater Portland is built upon the ancestral homelands, villages, and traditional use areas that tribes, bands, and indigenous people have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. Whereas Native American Heritage Month provides an opportunity to recognize the diverse cultures, achievements, contributions of tribes and urban indigenous communities in the region and society, while not forgetting Oregon and United States past transgressions, injustices, acts of violence, thefts of lands, and genocidal policies, which we vow to never repeat. And whereas this month also brings an opportunity to educate the public about how the government's attempted erasure and genocide of tribes and indigenous peoples can still be felt today through oppressive policies and practices woven throughout government systems. And whereas tribes and indigenous people carry cultural wisdom, traditional knowledge, professional expertise into every part of our communities, distinguishing themselves as artists, scientists, history makers, storytellers, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And whereas tribes and indigenous people have and continue to provide leadership in our region and across the country to provide critical natural resources, including first foods, the environment, and sensitive cultural and historic resources, which tell the story of our shared heritage for the benefit of all citizens of the United States. And whereas Metro continues its commitment to support tribal sovereignty through the agency's Tribal Affairs Program, which seeks to establish mutually beneficial relationships with interested tribes to inform and implement Metro's work within the context of honoring and respecting tribal treaty rights, tribal trust responsibilities, and ensuring the protection and stewardship of all sensitive cultural, historic, and natural resources across our region. And whereas the Indigenous Community Liaison Program in Parks and Nature is another critical part of our work, supporting Native community and access to land, stewardship of the land, and enhancing opportunities for the pursuit of traditional lifeways by the region's rich and diverse community representing over 380 distinct tribes in the Greater Portland area. And whereas Metro supports the agency's Indigenous Staff Affinity Group, who leads staff advocacy to create cultural knowledge opportunities which equip Metro staff and leadership with the necessary knowledge and skills to build these relationships with tribes, Indigenous community serving organizations, and Indigenous community members, and affirms Metro's commitment to supporting Indigenous staff who work at Metro, at least 1% of Metro's workforce who identify as American Indian, Alaskan Native, and whereas Metro has a responsibility to implement regional policies, strategic planning, and projects in a manner that interrupts the systemic erasure of tribes and Indigenous people. Whereas Metro has a responsibility to incorporate Indigenous knowledge, a body of observations, oral and written traditional knowledge, innovations, practices, and beliefs developed by tribes and Indigenous peoples through interaction and experiences with the environment into the agency's regional research, policy, and decision making. Now, therefore, be it resolved, Metro shall recognize every November as Native American Heritage Month to honor the legacy and ongoing contributions of tribes and urban Indigenous community members throughout our vibrant community and region. And be it further resolved, Metro encourages other businesses, organizations, public institutions, community members to recognize National Native American Heritage Month and celebrate the tribal nations and Indigenous peoples who deeply enrich the quality and character of the community, making Portland and Oregon a better place to live and work. Adopted by you all this November 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wong. We'll go ahead and hand things back over to you, concluding our staff presentation and the reading of the proclamation for your further discussion.
Well, thank you, Katie and Jess, for your presentation, and thanks for sharing your beautiful blanket. And it's great to see you here, JR. Thanks for visiting. Councilors, any questions or discussion?
Before we introduce a motion to adopt?
I think for questions, that's appropriate.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
No.
We'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the resolution.
I'll second.
Okay.
Everybody seconded.
Everybody.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, for a record, we'll have this motion moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Simpson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Um,
I'm just going to make a comment.
of course.
I think I should call the roll.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? Let's go back. We'll roll it back. Let's make comments. I'm sorry. We'll go with Councilor Rosenthal.
I just had a question and actually sort of a comment. I was wondering, considering the number of tribes that are represented in Greater Portland, and considering all the programs that Oregon Public Broadcasting has been showing lately, I learn a lot about tribes in other parts of the country. I'm just wondering, has OPB adopted a specific policy to honor Indigenous Peoples Month? Because they have some very good programs, and I'm just wondering if that is, are they one of the community leaders that has also adopted a resolution? Do you know?
That's a great question, Councilor Rosenthal. I don't know right off the top of my head, but we can follow up and look at that. They do have some great materials, reporting and programming that's been produced with Indigenous community or tribes involved, and would encourage folks to check out those materials. We've also been endeavoring to share reporting and coverage from Native-led news organizations, including Underscore, which is a Native reporting outlet that's based here in Portland, to bring forward those Indigenous perspectives in the coverage and discussion of important topics with our staff too. But we can follow up on that question about Oregon Public Broadcasting, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Let's just go down the row. We'll start with Councilor Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Katie and Jess, for presenting. There are a lot of organizations that pass resolutions of support, and others that also make those resolutions living documents. But I'm not aware of any organization here in Oregon that does more than you have helped us do in really making engagement, awareness, and respectful consultation part of how we do the work we do. And I think that's worth noting. Thank you for bringing this to us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to make this declaration, and I'm excited about revisiting it throughout the year. Every day is Native Americans Day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Deputy President Wong. Thank you, Katie and Jess, for guiding us through this and leading us through this. This is so essential to our government and to our practices and to exercising and living our values and living the democracy that we want to see. And Councilor Wong, I'm really inspired by the message that you made earlier, and I really appreciate this meeting being able to center the future that we want to see and the region that we want to build. And so thank you for your leadership at this agency to continue to center the families and the tribes and the Native folks and Indigenous folks that live here, and to all of our external partners that support that and also raise the bar of what Metro should be doing. Thank you to folks like JR and many others. So I'm very happy that we'll have the opportunity to vote on this resolution today. I want to thank you for your hard work and keep it up.
Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I wanted to thank you for bringing this resolution in front of us, and thank you for reading it. I know you wrote it weeks ago. It sounds different today, given Tuesday. So thank you for reading it. Thank you for raising all of the work that we have done, be it work with the otter or the condor or the salmon homecoming. Those are not just investments in our program and in the ecosystem and the animal, it's in the people of the region. So as we affirm this month as Metro, I think we should be affirming it to be celebrated by people across all of Metro, not just our agency. And that really rings home for me because when I think about the most special place in my district, it is a place that has been most special since time immemorial with Willamette Falls and the work that is being done there, not only with Metro recognizing some of the harm that we've caused and trying to do good going forward, but we're trying to educate our government partners and community members and have them affirm and reaffirm the necessity of making sure that work centers tribal engagement and building relationship, because we can only make progress at that speed of trust and at that speed of joint investment or um, uh, joint partnership. So the work that's ahead of us is going to be steeper and harder. The work that has already been under resourced. I was at a tribal headquarters building a couple weeks ago and saw a posting that said, you know, we don't have anything more this quarter. You're on a waiting list. How is that already under resourced environment going to shift? It's going to be harder, particularly when we're working in those spaces that there's no clear authority, there's no clear space for what comes next. And I want us to be solutions oriented, be creative, and push for what is right. So thank you for bringing this resolution for us today to think about not only what we have done, but what we will do.
Thank you.
Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong. Thank you, Katie, Chess, staff, JRC back there. Thank you. You always got to thank our guests for coming into the house or the building today. This is long overdue, and about time. I'm glad you're here doing that today, especially after Tuesday. I think we have to, again, to all the points the council's made, reaffirm our commitment to our region and to the region that we want to see out of this. And this is going to be a rough 4 years, but you have to, as leadership, stand firm in our beliefs and our values and the values of this region. And I'm happy that we're here, and I hope that we can continue to grow those relationships. And I wish we could make the blankets permanent. That's just me saying that out loud, though. I know you need your blanket back, but
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, we've already had a motion and second, so let's move on to the roll call vote then.
Okay, Counselor Simpson,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Aye.
Counselor Rosenthal,
Enthusiastic, yes.
Counselor Gonzalez,
Aye.
Counselor Nolan,
Yes.
and Deputy Council President Wong.
Aye, and the motion or resolution passes. Thank you again for coming in, and we look forward to all our continued work.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to presentations. This is item 4.1, Willamette Cove Master Planning Nature Park Concepts. But before we get into this agenda item on Metro's progress at Willamette Cove and a request for high-level feedback on a few conceptual designs, I want to take a few moments to honor the passing of Bob Salinger, a giant of the environmental advocacy community. We are planning a remembrance for Bob next Thursday morning, but I want to acknowledge his influence on Willamette Cove before we proceed. What does one say or do to honor a man who dedicated over 30 years of his life working to protect what can't speak for itself, our natural areas? Thank you seems too small, but there it is. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for making time to represent all of us through your representation of the natural world in the heart of a city and beyond. And thank you for pushing. Whether it was care for a tiny creature at the Wildlife Care Center, climbing to the highest points of a Fremont Bridge to care for a peregrine falcon, or care for our ecosystem through endless work to pass funding measures close to home and management plans for our state forests and deserts, Bob seemingly made time to do it all. Perhaps most impressively, despite his enormous passion and commitment to his work, he remained a believer in partnership, compromise, and moving ahead. Bob's legacy is enormous. It is not hyperbole to say that the greater Portland metro area, and in fact the state of Oregon, was made profoundly better through Bob's work and leadership. Bob's work leaves a legacy written in the waters, forests, and wildlife in our region, a story cut short much too soon. So with our deepest condolences and appreciation to his family, thank you, Mr. Salinger. Marisa, did you have some remarks to share as well?
Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong. Metro, my family, and the conservation community was deeply saddened to learn of the sudden passing of Bob over the weekend. He was a champion for wildlife, habitat preservation, and community-driven conservation efforts. His decades of service and passion have left a lasting impact on the natural spaces and communities across the Portland area. We're all indebted to Bob for his efforts advocating for the protection and restoration of habitats, especially along the Willamette River, helping to preserve these spaces for future generations. He's a fierce advocate, and I mean fierce. If you've ever been in a meeting with Bob, and he interrupted you, you got to feel that passion. And he advocated for the establishment of the network of parks and natural areas that Metro now stewards. Metro works alongside those dedicated to urban wildlife conservation, and Bob's work to protect migratory birds, native plants, and other species are crucial to the ecosystem's balance, moving that forward. While sometimes making work harder, Bob never shied away from challenging assumptions, which in turn created stronger, more resilient outcomes. Bob was committed to educating the public and engaging diverse communities in conservation. His programs have empowered residents to become active stewards in the environment and normalize the idea that conservation starts at the community level, inspiring thousands. He will be remembered for his years of service and unwavering dedication to Portland's natural heritage, and his legacy will inspire conservation efforts for years to come. And on a final note, I'll just share the last time that I saw Bob was at the opening of the new airport living room. I don't know what we're calling it. And I happened to be talking to someone from the port. And he ran up to both of us and he said, "Aha, you guys are talking. What are we going to do about West Hayden Island?" And then he took a selfie with us. I don't know if he was going to use it as leverage or what. But, he was right. What are we going to do?
Okay.
So, thank you.
Councilors, would anyone else to share some remarks? See, Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, I just want to say, Bob was a force for nature and a force of nature.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy President Wong. And I remember a few minutes after I read the news, I immediately texted President Peterson. I was like, "We got to do something for Bob." And I'm sure many of you feel that in your heart as well. I mean, as a legend that has really guided a lot of Metro's work, his fingerprints are all over the 2006 Parks and Nature Bond and 2019 Parks and Nature Bond. Has really helped this region be exceptional when it comes to our standards and our expectations for conservation. So you'll be sorely missed. And just there's unfortunately we don't always have the opportunity to say goodbye. And I think that is the hardest part. Because I feel like he still had so much to teach and to give and to mentor and to cultivate the next generation of climate activists and environmental conservationists. And yeah, he's an inspiration, and we'll leave it at that for now. Thank you for the opportunity to share some words.
Thank you. We'll go with Councilor Lewis.
It's hard to really imagine what this region would look like without Bob Salinger. And there are very few who have made such marks on our state and on our region, particularly somebody as both powerful and humble as Bob Salinger. He was a little bit like St. Francis. And he was the best that it comes to when it is a time to negotiate, but also time to hold to your values, because he managed to do both in a way that I've never seen from anybody else. He had a gift for photography. And I think that matters because it's how he sees the world, not only animals and people, but in moments, and capturing the essence of that time, that moment. And it's not all just black and white. The nuance exists in the shadows and in the gray area. And that's what he was really adept at taking advantage of in pushing us all, making us better leaders, and making our world a better place. Miss him already.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong. A huge loss to our community. I've known Bob not as long as most, but I've been in the rooms with him on the advocacy side and on the flood safety work. And Bob was steeped in his convictions, man. And I think, he would want us to remember him, but also to keep this work going. He was very staunch in making sure that we did what was right. And I think we have to continue to do what's right for our people and our environment here, as he did, and keep that fight going and not lose sight and focus of that. I think he wouldn't want us to do that. So, my heart goes out to him and his family, his friends, the entire community. It was just it's a tragic loss. And yeah, we still got work to do, and Bob is watching.
All right, thank you all. Georgia, is there anyone signed up to testify in remembrance of Bob today?
No, there's not. I believe we're going to be having a lot of testimony next Thursday during the resolution.
Okay. Councilors, would you all appreciate a brief recess, or should we continue on?
Let's get going.
All right.
Okay,
go
go
ahead. All right. Well, thank you all. Let's all take a deep breath, and we'll turn to the Willamette Cove updates. I'll quickly remind my fellow councilors, as well as those watching today, how we got here. So Metro purchased Willamette Cove in 1996, following the passage of a 1995 Green Spaces measure. The goal of the purchase was to create access to nature and connecting the Willamette Greenway trail through the property. The land was used extensively for industrial activity from the early 1900s into the 1970s. So before this could happen, Willamette Cove needs to be cleaned up. In recent years, this council took specific actions to make this happen. In 2020, council unanimously passed a resolution clarifying that Willamette Cove was eligible for funding through the 2019 Parks and Nature Bond, and directed staff to take specific actions. In 2021, council passed a budget note setting aside bond funds to support this work. And in 2022, council listened to wisdom from tribal partners and looked 7 generations ahead by agreeing to remove excavated soil from a site rather than consolidating it on site. These are all important actions, and I'd like to pass it to our COO, Marisa Mandrigal, to introduce the topic.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Long. Hello again, Council. We've got a slide presentation.
If the folks in the back could please pull it up, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next slide, please. So thank you
one more. Yeah. Council for having the foresight to take those actions and ensure meaningful progress at Willamette Cove. I'm so proud of this project, and I've been able to serve as executive sponsor of the work, which has provided me with the opportunity to be involved and updated in detail over the last 3.5 years. I also want to acknowledge the many important partners we've been working with. Jennifer will share a complete list with you later, building on the presentation that you'll hear. I'd specifically like to mention the tribal engagement, and particularly this project built tribal engagement into the work from the very beginning and represents the standard for working with our tribal partners. I don't live far from the site, and I've visited before. I knew it was special when I was there on my first trip, and 2 bald eagles were landing, and I had actually never heard bald eagle in their funny little screech. That sounds like it doesn't match their bodies, but it was a magical experience. I knew it was a good sign. I've stayed informed of the progress over the last few years, and I attended the environmental field day with my kiddos just the other weekend. Was overjoyed at the community participation, the fun, the optimism, and the spirit that surrounds this opportunity. I know that someday this land will be healed, and we will be so proud of our collective efforts at Willamette Cove. I'd like to now pass it to our project sponsor, Paul Slyman.
Thank you, Marisa. Good morning, counselors. For the record, I'm Paul Slyman, your General Manager of Major Projects and the project sponsor for this work. With me is Jennifer Devanzo, and Jennifer will introduce herself in a few minutes. As Councillor Huang mentioned, the uplands of Willamette Cove were used extensively for industrial activity, really throughout the 1900s. This included lumber and plywood mill operations, barrel manufacturing, and ship repair. Also included piers and dry docks. This unfortunately resulted in contamination across Willamette Cove, and the amounts of these contaminants are dangerous for people, plants, and animals to be in contact with over long periods of time. Fixing this is no small effort, but we can do it. And today we're going to show you that we're increasingly closer. While Jennifer and I have the privilege of presenting this information to you, please know that we represent the many remarkable staff from across Metro, some of whom are seated behind us here. If they'll dare to raise their hands. And many of whom were in the previous presentation. Making the site safe opens a rare river access opportunity for people of North Portland, and it also represents an important environmental justice action for all of us by allowing people access to nature in our metropolitan area. There's no question that the work at Willamette Cove matters, but its importance extends beyond the boundaries of the site. Next slide, please. This is part of our region's blue space, part of a resting and feeding spot. You can see in this slide how the work at Willamette Cove contributes to a much larger string of pearls. This is what needs to be happening throughout the Willamette River system. And it happens with amazing partners at the City of Portland, the State of Oregon, the Port of Portland, and the valuable input from community members and their organizations, and of course, the tribes. There's a strong salmon theme today. I've previously shared Metro's contribution to creating a salmon superhighway along this stretch of river. Highways may not be the best metaphor, so our revised goal is creating a salmon-safe transportation corridor with appropriate, safe, and comfortable rest areas to help juvenile salmon as they make their way downriver on their journey to the ocean, where they will feed and grow, and through the wonder of nature, return after a few years to their homecoming. Next slide, please. Jennifer is going to update you on the activities to shape the future of Willamette Cove. Following that, these are the questions we'll pose to you. We wanted you to see them now so you have them in mind as Jennifer goes through her slides. I'd like to pass it to Jennifer now.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Council, for having us here today. I'm Jennifer Devanzo. I'm a landscape architect and planner working on the Willamette Cove Nature Park Master Plan.
Your decision to make Willamette Cove a regional priority allows me to present the Willamette Cove Park progress. I'm grateful for what you did for the people, plants, and wildlife along the Willamette River. Also, your support allows us to integrate the site master planning with remedial action to find synergies and opportunities for the future of Willamette Cove. From this slide, you'll see we are halfway through master planning. The timeline shows the phases of master planning, as well as how tribal consultation and community engagement is woven throughout the process. Early this spring, we worked with tribes and community on phase one, to start generating values and ideas on how the site would be used and what elements are priorities. Based on phase one values and feedback, our consultant team, Not Studio, Mike Young is here today with us, developed 3 design scenarios. We are at the end of phase 2, where we collaborated with the Willamette Cove and Water Group, which is the City of Portland, the Port of Portland, and the Department of State Lands. Also collaborating with the Upland Remediation Design Team, which is Metro and the Port of Portland, to review and discuss the feasibility designs, knowing there'll be constraints on the site due to the final remedy. After a few back and forth iterations, we brought the scenarios to the tribes for review, made some additional tweaks before presenting the scenarios to communities at our workshops and open house. The next phase, phase 3, we will take all the feedback that we accumulated through phase 2 to draft a preferred design, and that will then be taken back to the tribes and community for further input. At the end of the 4th phase, we'll be coming back to you for a council adoption of the final master plan. So as you can see, this project is rooted in tribal and community input. Next slide, please. This morning you heard from Katie McDonald and the Indigenous Staff Affinity Group discussing the importance of Native American Heritage Month. Katie has been working on the Willamette Cove project since she began at Metro. She started relationship building with the tribes consulting on the Portland Harbor Superfund site. Willamette Cove is the first comprehensive project from the beginning that we've had clear path for consultation, learning from all the things tribes have told us on other projects. At Willamette Cove, for Willamette Cove project, we have 3 commitments with the tribes: to consult early and often. We've been consulting with the tribes since 2021 on Willamette Cove. Distinct. We have been working with the tribes on the site conservation plan. The site conservation plan for Willamette Cove is the first site conservation plan at Metro that we've worked with tribes throughout and setting precedent for future site conservation plans. And also high priority, giving tribes high priority on conservation. Tribes' priorities for Willamette Cove have been shallow water habitat and restoring the site to how the land is intended to be. We have continued relationship building with the tribes and will continue to collaborate with them as the project moves through master planning. Next slide. Based on Resolution 2051-49, a meaningful engagement strategy was produced. Since then, Corey Eldridge and Hasiel Lopez are the force behind community engagement, have taken that strategy and produced a robust engagement plan with consultants, Cascade Partners. They've been connecting with communities, including Indigenous communities, Black and Brown communities, people of color, people with disabilities, youth, the houseless community, and conservation and community advocacy groups. Early this year, engagement started with one-on-one interviews with community-based organizations. These organizations were Nistaika Willamette, Ground Score, ELSO, Aim for Access, Portland All Nations Canoe Family, the Blueprint Foundation, Latino Outdoors, Verdi,
Bird Alliance of Oregon. After the one-on-one interviews, the team created more avenues for engagement. Next slide, please. So if anything from this slide, we're wanting you to see like how we are taking different avenues for engagement. So for the workshops, the surveys, and the open house, mailers were sent to 37,000 homes in North Portland for both phase 1 and phase 2 of the master plan. Other avenues of engagement include social media posts, updates to the Metro's project page, as well as newsletters and tabling events at community events and farmers markets. The success has been going to the community where they're at. In December, we're planning a focus group for people with disabilities. Now I'll talk briefly about engagement, outcomes, and priorities and values from what we're hearing from both phase 1 and phase 2. Next slide, please. So this slide is nature, nature, nature. We were hearing loud and clear from tribes, communities, advocacy groups that this is high priority for Willamette Cove. During phase 1, the initial programming and visioning, we asked tribes and communities, should the park be all for nature or all for humans? And 85% of the responses were between a balance and weighted higher on the mostly for nature. And then during phase 2 of design alternatives, we asked, should Willamette Cove have more trails for humans or less trails for more wildlife and habitat connectivity? And again, 80% wanted a balance of trails and more space for wildlife. Next slide, please. In addition to nature, other priorities for park elements are nature trails, beach, canoe, and boat launch. That's just like in priority, but lots of other priorities. And the ways that people wanted to use the park included walking, running, and rolling on trails, wildlife observing, gathering at loved ones, and being in or near the water. Next slide. From consultation with the tribes and workshops and surveys, these key values emerged. A place for the land to heal, a healthy place for people, plants, and animals to thrive, a balance of habitat and recreation, a connection to the past, present, and future through stories and art, and tribal use for ceremonial and cultural practices. Our design team, Knott Studio, used these values to create 3 design scenarios for Willamette Cove Nature Park that are consistent with the remedial designs and actions to make the site protective. I'm going to take you on a high-level walk through the designs, sharing how tribes and communities' values are used to shape the designs. Next slide. So to start, all the designs have a main vehicular entrance off of Richmond Avenue, which is on the west side of the project, the slide, or the left side. A connection of the North Portland Greenway Regional Trail that traverses the site, which is the thicker red line, and then nature trails, gathering spaces, and water access. So this scenario is called the Cove. The Cove offers a balanced, restored environment that honors both nature and human use, where elements are dispersed throughout the site. The location of the Cove is a restored, shallow water habitat supporting the land's healing. A network of nature trails winds through the restored habitat along the riverbank, connecting a variety of spaces throughout the park, allowing for both recreation and habitat to coexist. From west to east, visitors encounter gathering spaces, benches, picnic area, interpretive designs, displays, and outdoor classroom, reinforcing connection to the past, present, and future. Water access is achieved by beaches and a small boat ramp. Additionally, the design respects and provides space for tribal, ceremonial, and cultural practices. The Cove scenario is a refuge for community and cultural and ecological renewal. Next slide, please. The panorama scenario's defining feature is the regional trail that extends out over the river at the site's narrowest section, offering stunning panoramic views. North of the regional trail lies a network of nature trails, fostering a balanced relationship between habitat restoration and passive recreation. The east side of the site offers a cultural storytelling loop and nature education, honoring the connection to the past, present, and future. Water access is achieved by beaches and a longer boat ramp with a medium-sized fishing dock. The panorama design is a place where people, plants, and animals can thrive and the land can heal. Next slide, please. The Shallows design is the most habitat-forward scenario and embodies the values of habitat and land and the value of healing the land and habitat restoration. Based on the String of Pearls concept that Paul earlier described, 3 shallow water habitat restoration sites are integrated into the design, providing more ecological benefits for juvenile salmon. This scenario displays more active use on the west side and tranquility on the east side. The active amenities feature an open-air shelter serving as a hub for educational programs and community and cultural gatherings. Water access is achieved by a medium-sized boat ramp and a longer dock. The tranquil east side has nature trails that wind through the restored oak and madrone habitats, offering connection to nature, supporting the value to balance recreation with habitat restoration. The Shallows designs embodies a commitment to healing the land while creating spaces for the community gathering and recreation. So during Phase 2's engagement events and surveys, we didn't ask community or tribes to pick what their favorite design is. We did ask them to pick their favorite elements from the designs. So from here, we will be, the reason why we did this was so then we can mix and match elements from the scenarios to meet the values we heard, as well as being compatible with the upland and the in-water remedies. I'm going to discuss 2 elements today. These 2 elements are within the spirit of passive recreation, but are built features on the landscape and in the water. Next slide, please. The first element is a built structure. From the survey, over 75% would like to see high-use elements concentrated together near the parking, like the Shallows scenario showed. The tribes support a decision that connect areas to public use to preserve a larger portion of the site for less development. This would also encourage access and use by tribal elders and individuals with mobility limitations. We also heard that a covered feature to assist with sheltering from the rain and sun is desirable for year-round use. Combining the classroom for education, cultural storytelling, and potentially a restroom reduces impacts on the landscape, as well as provides a space for year-round and ceremonial gathering and nature education. Next slide, please. Another element is a larger, longer boat dock. Willamette Cove is a special location on the Willamette River, since it will be the only nature park in North Portland and will offer public access to and from the water. We heard from Indigenous communities that they would like a place to dock their canoes. We also heard from tribes and community members that they would like a longer boat ramp and fishing piers for elders and youth to access the water for fishing, learning, and observing that's just beyond a sandy beach. A dock at Willamette Cove provides access from the land and from water, providing intentional access points to alleviate trampling by riparian vegetation at the shoreline. Now I will go through what's next for master planning. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, the next phase is phase 3. And this is where we're going to take all the feedback that we got from phase 2 to draft a preferred design. We'll continue to collaborate with Upland and the in-water cleanup designs and on the feasibility of the park designs with their designs. We will continue to consult with the tribes and outreach to communities on the preferred design leading to a final master plan. And at the end of 2025, we will bring that final master plan to you all for council adoption. Next, Paul is going to reiterate the questions that we're bringing forth to you today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, counselors, we recognize you've heard a lot from us in this presentation. That's why we wanted you to be able to have these questions in mind as Jennifer went through that material. And if we need to go back to some of the slides that were shown, we could certainly do that for you. But the first question is really about those three concept designs that Jennifer shared. And do you have any high level, emphasis on the high level? We don't expect you to get into any specific design elements or features, but if you have any high level on those three concept designs or design approaches, we'd appreciate it. And then we'll go to question 2, which is really those two design elements that are consistent with passive recreation, but arguably outside the resolution that council passed at the end of 2020. And if you'd like us to proceed with those elements as we continue the design work. And specifically, what I'm referring to there are the presence of a built structure for gathering space education on the site. And the second one is a longer dock for canoe families and fishing, arguably different than what was contemplated for like a sandy beach kayak launch or smaller launch. So we wanted to make sure that we discussed both of those elements with you before proceeding. So I'll just start with question 1 up there about any high-level feedback you have for us on the three concept designs and design approaches.
Great. Thank you, colleagues. Responses to question 1, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Deputy President Wong. Great to see this, and appreciate your hard work. I'll start with my response to question number 2, which is adaptive, comprehensive community engagement and feedback results in great recalibrations of a plan. Full support of that, and really appreciate our ability to listen with open ears and translate that to some meaningful changes. Reminds me of a lot of the work that I know John Blasher and the Parks and Nature team in general as well, and other areas of the of our agency to really open up how we can update plans. On number 1, I remember spending some quality time with the Willamette Cove team at one of the community festivals in September. And so I'm really, and I remember I gave great feedback there, and I don't want to contradict myself. So whatever you wrote down there is what I prefer. But I like the plans and seeing the level of thought that we're offering. And just in general, thank you, Paul, so much for carrying this project through a critical phase into your team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I have loved seeing the evolution of design ideas and everything from the charrette with the PSU students to the community engagement that included a giant stack of Legos. It's been really fun. I think it's really interesting that the first of the 3 design choices is called Cove, because that's what I think the whole thing as is Cove. That actually is interesting, because I think the other 2 remind me more of Cove. So my preference might be for the number 2 and the number 3, the panorama and the shallows, just based on moving people through the site a little more, it feels like. Just high level from a topographical map. That's what it feels like. It's more about movement in those 2, because you have the sandy either further into the bend or not at all. And then when it comes to a shelter and a longer dock, I'm a yes and a yes. In particular, wanting to make sure that the dock is not only potentially longer, but a shape that actually makes sense, not only for the use, but also for varied river heights. And if we're going to have a lot of movement in the water, I think there needs to be some adaptability built in there. And I think, not a structural engineer, I think that actually gets easier with different shapes. So let's be open to those. Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for bringing this. I will echo Councilor Lewis's comments about the process that has led us to this point. I have, before I can give feedback, I need a little more insight from you all about potential conflicts among the requests and their compatibility with both the cleanup effort, human exposure, and what have you learned that might inform me?
Thank you for that question, Councilor Nolan. Everything that Jennifer and I shared with you this morning is built on first and foremost making the site safe and protective. And the real benefit of being able to have Jennifer on board now is her work and the work of Knott Studios integrates with the cleanup that has to happen for the shallows and the in-water as well as upland. So put differently, the slowest and most expensive way to do this would be to do the entire cleanup and then look around and say, hey, we need a landscape architect to design a park afterward. And while integrating Jennifer and Knott Studios' work early isn't easy, there's a lot of back and forth and give and take. It allows them to modify their designs, find synergies with those cleanup actions, and really tighten the timeline and the cost to be the best steward of the funds that are going to go to this site. So the site will be safe, and you made a decision 2 years ago to make it safe for 7 generations by ensuring that all excavated soils are removed from the site rather than stored on site. And so all of Jennifer's work is based on that and looking for collaborative ideas with the in-water and upland remedial design teams so that we can create any one of these 3 that you see here today. It won't be easy, and there is a lot of collaboration meetings between those 3 groups, but the site won't be accessible if it's not safe. So we're focusing on first making it safe.
Thank you for that. A little deeper clarification. It's a long, narrow site, and it has topography challenges to it. Do the elements of the design options put too much on that land?
I think that's it.
Okay. I'm going to just reiterate your question. So you're wondering if the elements, if there's too many elements, or
if there's conflicts among the uses because of placing so much expectation and construction on the site.
So the way it's designed currently is we have the nature trail, the regional trail that we go through, and to alleviate pressure on that, we have smaller nature trails. And then we're looking at ways to reduce the amount of nature trails on the site, so then it's not in conflict with wildlife and habitat.
Good.
And then that one option where we showed for the uses mostly on the west side, that was another way to alleviate uses on the site and have most of that, like on the west side, it would be busier and high activity, but where there is space to leave the parking lot, go to the nature play, or go to a gathering space. So we are looking at those conflicts. Also, one of the other areas of conflict that we're looking at is where the trails will cross the regional trail. So in one of the earlier iterations, we had where the regional trail and the parking were in conflict, but at this point, like the parking wouldn't be in conflict with the regional trail. So we're still looking at those like conflict resolution in those.
Thank you. So the feedback I would provide is that if we are looking to a string of pearls, and I don't know if that starts at Kelly Point or not, because that's a bit of a wilderness park. But that we not expect too much out of any one of those pearls. And the absence of it now makes us hungry for all these opportunities in this one site. But just design it in a way that we hit all those, those goals.
Yeah.
But not cram them into one little site.
Yep. Thank you. That makes sense to me.
Okay, Councillor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I think it's amazing how much progress we've made in the 3 years since we made the decision to really move forward on this. I think it's great, and the outreach and the involvement is tremendous. And I like the concept of freshwater pearls, a little string of pearls along the river. I think it's great. It captures the imagination. I have, I guess, 3 points. First of all, I think that the highest priority from a habitat standpoint is the in-water habitat. And I think that I follow the leads of the tribe because we need to recover a lot more of the Willamette River than we have. We have other areas that we have to work on, such as Ross Island area, and there's a lot of things to be done, but this is really important. That said, on the other habitat, I think we have, as we know, there's habitat limitations. It's a very narrow band, and we're never going to connect it very easily to the upland habitat that's above it, which is mostly residential. So I think that would lead me to the conclusion that primarily, and I would agree with Councillor Lewis, a little bit more emphasis on neighborhood and regional use of the park, which would be a facility as well as a longer dock, so that people can get access out on the river. So I would tend to support that. The habitat for small creatures and things that can pass through that area is important, but I don't think it's the key. It's not a key habitat connector in a regional sense, and so I think that the human use and the community use is probably a higher benefit in this case. So,
thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor Simpson.
Deputy Council President Wong. Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. Thank you again for the continued and robust outreach. I like the designs 2 and 3. Particularly, is this the panorama? Yeah. Is this like a bridge kind of leading to the viewpoint on that?
It's it would be a bridge that would come out over the water, and that is there's you do see like that little viewpoint on the bridge. Yeah, it's just like a little nook out there, because if you're like on your bike or you're standing there, you want a little space to get out and see over the water.
I think those kinds of little elements, albeit, it may take a lot to get there, in the long run, the residents in that area would benefit greatly from it. And, coming back to something Council Rosenthal said, we should definitely be taking the lead of the tribes on this and restoring that land back to, it'll never go back to what it was originally was, but as close to that as possible.
Yeah.
And what was the other question? No, I don't have, question 1. Yeah, I think you all did. The concepts are right. You did the right kind of engagement. My big thing is making sure that we have that residential access. And I'm glad that y'all are doing an ADA outreach engagement session. That's super important, particularly for access to our nature and trails. And I do want to say, I went back and looked at those attachments you had on there, and attachment 2. This is a legacy of Councilor Bob Stacy. It was a budget note that he put in, so I just want to name that.
Thank you.
Just some questions for me. To quote last year's hit movie Barbie, my job is actually beach. Could you tell me a little bit about why beach the beach concepts are in 1 and 2, and like what the engagement was behind that. And I think one of my concerns is if the beach is popular, does that potentially disrupt the natural areas that people are trampling through? Because attendance is high. So like, what's the engagement? What are the trade-offs of
Yep.
beach?
Yep. So, do you want to put slide 13 on the screen? Just so then we could see that one. Yeah. So in this concept, there's the two beaches. So currently at the site, really where the cove is, like the shallow water habitat, that's where the current beach is. But on this one, we're looking at moving it to the west a bit. And this is just based on conversations that we did have with the in-water parties. And we did also have some really good conversations with the Yakima tribes about ways to also utilize the beach as habitat. So we could add like large wood or boulders. And then that's also a way that we could look at ways to alleviate that pressure of trampling habitat as well. That's some of the ideas. Obviously these don't have a lot of detail in them right now. And then the other beach that's further west, that's an existing beach that's on site currently. So it's looking at that location as well. How do we alleviate the amount of people? I think that you're looking at how are people getting there, the amount of parking that's there, the regional trail. So I think and then also the size of the beaches. They're not large beaches.
Is there any projection of like different attendance based on scenarios? If there's like a structure or a beach, I mean, it just seems like we're changing the intent a little bit if we have that structured beach concepts. But could be wrong.
Well, thank you for that question. The beaches are being used now. We have to remind ourselves that people access Willamette Cove not just from the land, but from the water. And part of the art that Jennifer incorporates is, if people are going to be there, how do we make sure that they're not trampling over the habitat that we've created? And that's why you see sort of deliberate pathways as opposed to demand trails that people just create because they're meandering. We'll joke, I think you should plant poison oak in certain areas to keep people out. Like, that's not going to happen for anyone who's listening on the call. But this is part of why we have professional landscape architects helping us figure this out, because people are accessing this long, narrow site from so many different avenues. Regarding the built structure, Councilor Huang, the reason we wanted to bring that to you is arguably it does create an intense use at a site that is as long and narrow in this. And part of the reason we do engagement is to hear what community and tribes want from us, as Councilor Gonzalez pointed out. And they have asked for a place where they could have a gathering space, ceremonies, and it would be accessible to them year round. What Jennifer and Knot Studios Michael are figuring out is what's the optimal placement of that, so that we don't over-concentrate uses, or we could also cordon off those places during certain tribal ceremonies or particular uses. There's a lot we have to figure out. How big is the parking lot? Who does it serve? We think this will be a very popular site. And here's why I say that. When we take any of you down to Willamette Cove, you could look across the river and see all kinds of area on the river, and then be reminded that 90% of it is in private ownership and it's not accessible to the community. The reason this is so popular, sometimes it feels there's a disproportionate amount of attention on this 3,000 linear feet of shoreline, but it's because there are so few areas where people can go. Other than Cathedral Park, which is right downstream, this is one of those few areas in North Portland where you can encounter the Willamette River. So we know that this will be popular, and we probably have some work to do to manage how popular it is. And that's why we have professionals that'll design access, design parking, and make it so that we can serve as many people in the best way possible without overloving it. And that is, again, why you allowing us to hire a landscape architect now integrates this important work with the cleanup.
And then have we begun any like preliminary cost estimates on any of these scenarios? Like, is there any substantial difference or deviation from the existing budget?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Oh, sorry. Have we begun any preliminary like budget projections on any of these scenarios? And are there any, like large scale differences amongst the scenarios in terms of price tag?
Oh, of the three.
Yeah. We have done. We're just starting to really look at those preliminary cost estimates. If you look at the second scenario with the over the water walkway, that one has a higher cost estimate right now. So that's where we'll look at. In this one also, you'll see there's less program on the site. So that was a way that we can try to offset those costs for this one alternative. We did do a cost exercise at one of our engagement, the in-person workshop where we gave them dots and we asked if you 6 dots and listed elements, and then one of them was over the water walkway, and that was 5 dots. So it was really seeing how important was it that if you wanted more program or less program. So we've been taking that into account. So when we go to our next our preferred design, then we can really look at that with cost.
So it's still too early to gauge exactly the magnitude of cost.
It's so high level right now.
Yeah. Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
All right. Colleagues, any more comments? Oh, and just for me, I also appreciate scenario 2 and 3. And I think having the covered structure in the dock makes sense as well.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this update. I look forward to continued work on it.
Thank you. We have just
we have
2 more slides.
Oh.
If you could go to, I think it's slide 20, maybe?
Yeah.
In a project as long and complicated as this, we tell each other it's always good to end with a little inspiration. And we just want you to see, we have a site now that we're going to make safe and protective. Someday it will also be healthy and welcoming. I'd like to be able to tell you when day 1 and year 5 are going to happen, but we're still working on those timelines. We have some high-level estimates. The good news is the in-water parties, again, city, state, and port, they're doing a great job. They just presented their 30% designs, so that's 30% construction drawings on how they'll make the in-water portion clean. That is twice the acreage of the upland. And on the upland side, Metro, working with the port, our partner there, recently submitted the basis of design report. So that means our 30% designs will be coming up soon. So we're very excited about this coming. I also wanted to share with you what I think Jennifer and I heard from you today. From Councilor Gonzalez, what I said before. So we'll definitely keep that, Councilor. And just your understanding that adaptive management comes from adaptive engagement. And we talk to communities and we listen to tribes so that we can make meaningful changes to our plans. I think I did hear a lot of support for concepts 2 and 3. They help move people through the site. That is absolutely consistent with the original purchase of this, which is filling in that North Portland Greenway, creating a spring water trail feature for the people who live in North Portland. I think I also heard some support for these design elements that Jennifer is requesting, a built structure for gathering and a longer dock, not just a sandy kayak launch, but a place where canoe families and others could actually tie up their boats or fish from. I think I also heard that let's be careful that we're not trying to do too much on a small site. And we hear you. And that extends not just to Councillor Nolan's comments, but yours as well, Councillor Huang, because we know this will be popular. We don't want to create conflicts. We do want people to have a good experience when they're there. And I think we also heard a lot of support for in-water habitat. And again, we're thrilled to be working with the in-water parties who will make great habitat, soften the banks, and create shallow water resting spaces for juvenile salmon. Let's see. We will come back to you. You know that you'll see Jennifer in 2 years with adoption of the site master plan. You'll get an idea of some dates and timelines for the development of the park. And I want to say that we just really appreciate your leadership. This is a very complicated cleanup site, part of a much larger, complicated 10-mile stretch of river. And Metro can really make some remarkable things happen here with our partners. If we could show one more slide, please. Jennifer?
Bob attended our first workshop in person and then our second workshop online. So we just have a few words that we wanted to say before we end. So Bob was on my interview panel when I interviewed to get hired at Metro. And I worked with him on the RFP for the Willamette Cove Nature Park. He gave good input on that. He was very passionate about restoring habitat at Willamette Cove and the Willamette River, finding the right balance of recreation use and being sure that we're using native plants. His voice, presence, guidance, and approval of the master plan and the nature park designs will be missed, and we'll think of him often when we continue to move along with the Willamette Cove Nature Park designs.
Bob helped me hire Jennifer, so his legacy is evident in her work. It's also evident in everything you've seen and heard from us this morning. I won't say too much because I know you have activities planned for next Thursday, and we've shared that with the many members of the community that have reached out to us on this project. As you can no doubt imagine, I spoke with Bob a lot about Willamette Cove, everything we were doing, a few things we weren't doing that he thought we should be doing. No matter what we resolved, Bob was steadfast in his commitment to healing this piece of land and making it a safe place. He was quite simply that good. I know many of us will think of him as we continue our work, and one day we'll create a site where people, plants, and animals can thrive. That concludes our presentation this morning. Thank you again for your time today and your leadership of this important project.
Paul, one more second. If Councilor Rosenthal does have a question.
I want to ask one other question. Since we can't divorce the upland design from the sloping shore design from the inshore work design, but we are not specifically responsible for the in-water work or the near-shore stuff. Will we have to get approval of our design concepts from DSL, DEQ, and EPA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are working closely with the in-water parties on their designs, and they're working with us. They're looking at our site conservation plans. But for like docks or other features, yes, we would have to go through the permitting process.
And U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will also be involved if we're going to do any restoration of in-water work, I assume.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so it's going to get part is going to get complicated. We can do the upland, but the downshore stuff is going to take a crew.
It's also looking at those synergies with that work because the in-water parties are exempt from a lot of those permitting requirements.
Right.
So, a lot for the habitat. So that's where we're going to continue to work with the in-water parties.
Yeah, they're responsible for cleanup, but not necessarily for the kind of restoration we might see. Okay.
Their cleanup does involve softening the banks, which is a big movement, which will create some of that shallow water habitat.
And I just want to say personally, Paul, I hope that your ideas on this interface will continue to have some influence on the process.
Absolutely.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you for the update, and thanks for all the inspiration at the end.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our consent agenda. We have 4 items on today's consent agenda. Item 5.1, consideration of the September 12th, 2024 council meeting minutes. Item 5.2, consideration of the September 26th, 2024 council meeting minutes. Item 5.3, consideration of the October 3rd, 2024 council meeting minutes, and resolution 5.4, which is number 24-5434, for the purpose of amending, canceling, or adding a total of 12 projects to the 2024-2027 MTIP to meet federal project delivery requirements. Is there a motion?
I'll move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilor Lewis and seconded by Councilor Gonzalez. I think we'll do a roll call. Okay.
Okay, Councilor Simpson,
Yes.
Councilor Lewis,
Aye.
Councilor Rosenthal,
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez,
Aye.
Councilor Nolan,
Yes.
and Deputy Council President Wong.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to ordinances. We will now turn to the first reading and public hearing of ordinance number 24-1521 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Chapter 7.05 Income Tax Administration regarding response deadlines for protests and appeals. The ordinance before us today for first reading presents a change to our supportive housing services tax code to align our tax code with past council direction in the City of Portland's and Multnomah County's tax codes. This ordinance proposes extending response deadlines for protests and appeals from 30 days to 180 days. Our tax compliance program manager, Justin Lobsher, is here to present the ordinance.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Deputy President Wong and councilors. My name is Justin Lobsher, Task Compliance Program Manager with FRS, Revenue and Analytics Division, here to discuss one ordinance involving updates to one SHS code section. Let me provide you with a summary. This goes into more detail in the staff report. Next slide, please. In 2022, the Metro Council changed how SHS business income is sourced and therefore taxed. At that time, Metro and its tax administrator anticipated increased workload due to possible increased tax appeals and protests resulting from the income sourcing changes. Accordingly, during those 2022 Metro code changes, Metro had intended to also change the response deadlines for appeals and penalty waivers from 30 days to 180 days to address these anticipated increased workload issues. For reference, the State Department of Revenue's response time is 1 full year. Unfortunately, those response deadline changes were inadvertently omitted from the 2022 code change package. Next slide, please. The City of Portland and Multnomah County made those changes to their codes at that time. Thus, Metro's code does not currently align with the city and county income tax codes, which creates uncertainty for taxpayers and inconsistency for the tax administrator. Metro should correct its earlier omission by changing response deadlines for appeals and waivers from 30 days to 180 days to better align with our partner jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Today's proposed update also importantly adds consequences if the administrator fails to meet the deadline. Should the deadline get missed, the taxpayer's outstanding balance is not automatically canceled, but interest and penalties cannot be imposed if the tax liability is deemed valid by the administrator. Adding a consequence for the administrator is significant because otherwise the Revenue Division Appeals Board or the tax court could impose their own consequences on Metro if one is not set in the code. This proposed treatment mirrors the state's practice. Next slide, please. And this concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions.
Great, thank you. Councilor Rosenthal.
Oh, yeah, but I did have a question. It was up from last time. What do we have a standard? Can you estimate what our standard response time is in general? I mean, I understand we have to try and make ourselves consistent. One of the things that, of course, bothers me in the long run is the frustration that people might feel from the year long that the state has to respond. I mean, they make a protest and then it takes a year. This doesn't make people very happy sometimes. But what is our standard response time if the protests that we do get?
Yeah, I don't have detailed statistics from the city of Portland, Council Rosenthal, but my understanding is the volume and response time is typically pretty quick. My understanding is there's only been one instance where the response deadline has gone beyond the 6-month period, and that's due to a case currently in litigation.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Okay.
Additional questions? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move to our public hearing. I will now open the public hearing on ordinance number 24-1521. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for public hearing?
Yes. If anyone wishes to testify on agenda item 241521, now is the time to do so. Testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I will manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can sign up to testify by raising your hand on Zoom. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand function has its own tab or is located within the reactions tab. Those calling in can raise their hands by dialing *9. If you are joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I will promote you to a full panelist when it is your turn to testify. I will call on your name or phone number when it is your turn to testify, and a window will appear asking you to accept being promoted to a panelist. Once you click accept, your Zoom window will close for just a brief moment before you rejoin as a panelist, where you will be able to turn on your camera if you like. As a reminder, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please introduce yourself for the record before testifying. And I do not see anyone in the audience who has raised their hands on Zoom or in person.
Okay. Well, seeing no more testimony, I will close the public hearing. The second reading for council consideration and vote are scheduled for November 14th, 2024. Thank you so much. The next item is COO communication. Marisa.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong. A couple reminders. Tomorrow, Friday, November 8th, is the last day for open enrollment. It closes. So if you have Metro benefits and you've not yet had a chance to review your elections, I would encourage you to do so. You can find information about how to do that on oregonmetro.gov/open enrollment. I also want to remind folks that Metro observes Veterans Day on Monday, November 11th as a holiday. This building, MRC, will be closed in observation of the holiday, and timesheet approvals will be due at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, November 12th. And then lastly, I want to thank Councilor Wong for your remarks at the beginning of the meeting. I know from talking to folks in our Metro community that many people are hurting and many people are scared for themselves, their physical safety, their way of life, their civil liberties. And I know sometimes people say that words don't matter, but they do. And so I just really appreciate your reassurances that Metro is a safe place for everyone. And I also encourage Metro employees to hold space for themselves and each other and offer grace and kindness to those around you. And if you find yourself needing additional support All Metro employees can access counseling services through our EAP Canopy, and you can access that by either calling 1-800-433-2320, texting 503-850-7721, or emailing info@canopywell.com. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to council communications, but let's keep them as brief as possible because we have executive session. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong. I just really want to quickly invite the council and folks in the agency out Monday to the Veterans Day Parade on MLK. I'll be arriving about 11 a.m. to MLK and Beach. Metro has put in a sponsorship, so we officially are in that parade. So if you want to join me, please let me know. And also I'm a veteran, so that's also why I'm doing this. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Wanted to report back the ZAP program, which works with teens and paid internships at the Oregon Zoo, hosted its first ever advocacy roundtable on Saturday morning, and it was exciting to have our paid interns with the what do they call themselves? WPES, whatever their internship program is. They were there as well as the Zoo Owls. So wanted to lift up that work and 20 plus amazing youth. Also wanted to report back the Supportive Housing Services Oversight Committee met again on Monday, and we had an extended meeting, 1 hour for each of the 3 counties to present their annual reports. Their annual reports were published on Friday. I have not had a chance to read 600 pages, but I did listen in. There have been some marked steps forward, but colleagues, I have to raise some significant alarm around the lack of consistent reporting, particularly on populations A and populations B. Particularly because our staff had suggested a template that seemed very simple and straightforward. I believe it was just an Excel, and finance staff at the counties had agreed to it. And then those templates were not integrated into the final reports. So there are some alarm bells going off for me. Thank you.
Big time.
Yeah, I just want to update on last Friday. Eduardo Ramos and Georgia held a long-term civic engagement class here in this council session. It was all in Spanish. I answered some questions with the help of his interpretation. It was very interesting. They were learning or trying to experience. They actually did a mock council session where they came up here and sat here and answered questions. It was sort of interesting. I'm not sure I answered their questions correctly, but they asked some very deep questions about civic engagement and the role that the council plays in the region. So I thought that was very interesting, and it took a lot of work. I think it took 3-4 hours. So I appreciate both Georgia and Eduardo's efforts on that regard.
All right, seeing no further discussion, council meetings.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Sorry, no, I know the raised hand blends in with the yellow and whatnot. Cool. Councilor Rosenthal, actually, my sister was here for that training. Yeah, so it was funny because she took a photo of during our inauguration. There was she was like, oh, my brother's in the photo there, so it was just funny. She sent me a photo. I laughed and appreciate Georgia and Eduardo for bringing in the community and creating a space in multiple languages where people feel their leadership seen, heard, and also have the opportunity to exercise that and do some skill building. Just some quick updates. Last Thursday, Councilor Rosenthal and I, we were able to sit down with THPRD leadership, including Doug Menke and some of the directors, as well as John Glasher. We were able to have some great conversations around agency partnership as it relates to major priorities in that part of the region. So I wanted to provide an update on that. And also last night, I was a part of a housing forum with Bienestar. It was a virtual forum, and we had conversation about the whole housing continuum. But I'm really happy to share that from that conversation, we had a pretty in-depth chat about the SHS measure and also some of the reforms that the council is considering to put on the ballot in May. And just community is interested, engaged, gave some good feedback. Just want to let y'all know that work is happening. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, this time, seeing no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is set for Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m. We will now move to an executive session held pursuant to ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Counselors will meet in room 375 for executive session. Only members of the news media and designated staff may attend.